Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Legal 500 webinar on Central and Eastern Europe's elite law firms, managing partners in discussion, and challenges in the wake of COVID-19 and beyond. We're joined in by a number of managing and founding partners from Central and Eastern Europe. Very happy to have them with us today. When looking at some of the challenges that many Central and Eastern Europe's elite law firms face today, it is hard to come to the conclusion that they were foreseeable when those same firms were first established decades ago. The COVID-19 pandemic has forced a huge portion of the workforce to re-examine their desired work-life balance. Strong salary pressures from international firms have to be withstood, whilst a younger generation of talented practitioners look beyond the law for lucrative opportunities. Do all those challenges pose a challenge to the model of the law firm as we know it? Do firms have to adapt in order to survive? And what opportunities are there for those that do? The importance of strong corporate culture in law firms. Can a strong purpose in a firm translate into a solid competitive advantage in the marketplace? Now, the answers to those questions are, of course, multifaceted, but a few clues, maybe with some of our speakers today. We're joined in by Borislav Boyanov, managing partner of Boyanov and Company. Boris, very good to have you this morning. Good morning. Borislav Boyanov is the managing partner of Boyanov and Company and is a founder and co-chair of the C Legal Group, a highly respected figure in the market. He is recognized for his work for international investors. Mr. Boyanov has an instrumental role in many of the landmark transactions of Bulgaria. His activity is dedicated to promoting the rule of law and improving the business climate, both in Bulgaria and the SEE. We're also joined in by Thomas Wardinsky, who is the founding partner and a key practitioner at Wardinsky & Partners. Wardinsky & Partners is spread across many firms in Poland, in Warsaw, Krakow, and Poznan, bringing together expertise in private client, tax, administrative, and criminal law, as well as expertise in banking and securities disputes, competition law issues, and IP. And they're, of course, involved in human rights issues. Thomas, good morning to you too. Pleasure to have you this morning with us.
Good morning.
We're also joined in by Richard Locke, who is an English lawyer with extensive experience of European and Hungarian cross-border investment transactions and of the corporate law matters. He has been in Hungary, a resident of Hungary for nearly 30 years, and he leads the firm's relationship with the international law firms. Richard, good morning to you as well.
Good morning, all.
Also joining us today is Martin Solk, who is a founding partner, recognized as one of the leading M&A and corporate restructuring lawyers in the Czech Republic, and he's been ranked repeatedly as eminent practitioner. He was twice elected Lawyer of the Year in the Czech Republic in commercial law, and in 2017, Martin became the first person from Central Europe to be elected as president of the International Bar Association. Good morning, Martin.
Good morning, Chris.
We're also joined in by Aku Sarainen, who is a founder and senior partner of Sarainen. He has special interest in history and law firm management, the latter of which he considers to be not only work, but lifestyle. He advises corporations mainly in the fields of mergers and acquisitions and real estate transactions. Aku has received the Knight's Cross, first class, of the Order of the Lion in Finland from the Finnish president in 2015, for 2 decades of work in developing relations between Estonia and Finland and for supporting Finnish businesses in the Baltic and Belarusian region. Good morning, Aku.
Good morning, Chris.
Last but certainly not least, we're joined by Peter Winkler, who is a partner, head of corporate and M&A practice at E&H Rechtsanwälte GmbH, and his expertise extends to banking and finance, and he focuses on large M&A, capital markets, and banking transactions. Peter, good morning to you as well.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all very much for joining us today. We have a broad selection of topics, but I thought that, Boris, we could perhaps start the conversation with you and just get your opinion on what are the big trends that you are seeing with regards to law firms today retaining talent and if we could introduce our audience to some of the main issues that law firms are facing in this area.
Good morning, Chris and everybody. Thank you very much. Maybe you gave me the floor because I'm the only one with a tie, so I understand that. The American writer Alvin Toffler said, you remember, the future comes rapidly and in wrong order. I have been already a lawyer for 38 years, and after post-communist changes in Central and Eastern Europe in early 90s, now I'm facing for second time a period with so dramatic changes, which I frankly enjoy. I really hope the war which started last night will not bring new developments, but this is not the topic we'd like to go in today. We see in our region, quite similarly to the other parts of the global village, many interesting trends. Just to mention the rise of virtual law firms, all kinds of alternative suppliers of legal services. One thing which is very modern nowadays, collaborative working, etc., etc. Chris, you mentioned that COVID accelerated enormously certain developments, which in fact started before the pandemic, like working from home, remote working, working from everywhere, flexible working hours, emerging technologies. This acceleration, particularly for the technologies, has been enormous. For remote working, recruiting people, meetings, education, data storage, documents, clients management, etc., etc. The other trend we see is an increasing exit from legal profession, promoting work-life balance, push for mental health, etc. The home office regime of work, the pandemic and its victims caused mental and other problems for some people, but also created an atmosphere for most of us to rethink our values and priorities. As a direct consequence, maybe, we have a process called the Great Resignation. The Great Resignation is very real, and no single industry has escaped its effects, including us as lawyers and law firms. Lawyers are leaving firms, banks, companies, etc., not to go to a competitor like before, or at least not so often. They are leaving the profession to join businesses or to go to villages to live closer to the nature, to travel around the globe, etc. And this is causing a cascading effect of turning away clients, offering expensive compensation packages, or even relax certain hiring standards we had before. As we know, the people are the main assets the law firms have. Their retention today, for me, is the main challenge, and we have to learn how to keep and develop our people. What could we do practically? There are many things we know, but I'd like just to share a few of them. We have to spend more time talking to our people, showing empathy and understanding of their needs, thinking of them not only as professionals, but as human beings, and addressing together challenges they may have. This means to have human attention, to provide care in different forms, health insurance, medical support, including for their families, teaching meditation, yoga, intellectual stimulation, and of course, attractive remuneration packages. Something which many of the senior lawyers neglect, but it's a must. We have to communicate often with our younger colleagues, teaching and mentoring them, providing feedback, giving them more responsibilities. We must understand the young lawyers should learn constantly a lot, and this cannot happen online. It requires an effort from us and face-to-face contacts. Being in the office allows for creative and spontaneous interactions and add value. So does the ability to learn from others in person. Therefore, the time we spend in the office needs to be focused more deliberately on interactions, not just to stay behind the closed door. Change the business model maybe is another trend. I have the feeling for it, and to have exit from the current pyramids and to go to more horizontal form of this model, something like a joint stock company with more shareholders, with close collaboration, not only within the firm, but also with external lawyers and other suppliers. Here, the diversity also helps, and it's not only an empty slogan. I mentioned the technology. Use of technology is crucial, whether it's for remote work or digital collaboration. People like it, they need it, they feel well working in a modern firm. More importantly, technology eliminates certain repetitive, boring, and time-consuming tasks and allows lawyers to focus on their core work with added value. Another very important thing, adaptive to the trends firm's culture on which we must insist. This is our identity and the glue for our teams. It creates a working environment that associates will not want to leave, even if they get another offer. Our culture is directly and vitally related to people's retention. And last but not least, maybe it's securing the opportunities for our lawyers and firms to contribute and to work for the society, to make the life better. Participation in legislative, green, and other social initiatives. I was very impressed when I saw on your website that this is the main aim for your firm, to make the life in the Baltics better. So admirations for that. So I think all mention is a must if we want to work in the firm of the future, as it's very fashionable to say. But in fact, we are already, Chris, in the future.
Thank you for that, Boris. That was a very meaty answer. You touched on a number of different variables there, a number of issues that we could discuss and that we will visit sequentially throughout our conversation. This is the reason we feel so lucky to have a number of you here with us today to share your experience. One thing before we go into the conversation further, I would like to encourage the audience to come forward with any questions throughout, and we will do our best to incorporate them into the conversation and answer them. We feel that our webinars are at our best when the audience feels engaged and included, so please do not hesitate to type in any question at any point, and we will do our very best to answer it. So Boris, one of the many things to admire about that answer was how multi-dimensional it was, in that you seem to treat people first and foremost as a central element of any law firm, something to be nurtured, something to be treasured, and something to cultivate rather than any other assets that can be commoditized. So something whose value can exponentially grow. And you touched on a number of different things to do that. And you also touched on a number of issues that I would love to get into more depth today, such as legal tech, how that has contributed to perhaps helping some of the workload and connecting people and presenting the opportunities. That's all very interesting. Before we do, I was wondering if we could touch a little bit on, if we could take a little bit step back and just look at things from a little bit of a distance and talk about the law firm model, which seems to have largely evolved in a number of decades prior. Thomas, I was wondering if I could come to you and ask, how do you see the evolution of the law firm model? Do you see that in relation to what Boris just so nicely illustrated for us? Do you see that as an adequate way of thinking about the law firm for the future?
Well, it's a good question. And I think that we are, in a way, experiencing the variation of the old concepts of the profession, which in a way is subject to a constant changes and also business opportunities, because even though we are a profession which mainly is occupied with exercising a mission, at the end of the day, we do some business, and this business so far was, as Boris mentioned, the repetitive work whereas we have been able to purchase the labor on the, so to say, market and resell it to the client. Now, in the older days, we were in a way trusted advisors, somehow providing wisdom to our clientele. And that was something like 40, 50, 70 years ago in certain countries. And I think that we are back into the square one, but collectively, because the law firm is a collective way of exercising the profession. Now, so in a way, we have to integrate the knowledge from many disciplines into something which would represent a value for the client. And I would say the technical development makes it, I would say, in a way easier, but also in certain areas quite complicated. So I think that certainly when it comes to so-called business model, we will have to elaborate a new expertise each time we are instructed by the client, whereas in the older days, we were able to elaborate expertise and then to resell it a few times and thus capitalize on our investment. Now, I would say this challenge will require law firms to be staffed with highly competent, intelligent, creative, and empathic lawyers. And I think that we will have very little time to capitalize on our investment, if at all. So therefore, this wisdom will be somehow of a value to a client, and clients will have to pay for this value. But here comes one more observation, that lawyers, they need to be well off with a view to be able to remain independent, because independence is the main feature of the profession. So the way I view, I would say, the changes is that lawyers will be less staffed, law firms will be less staffed with, I would say, lawyers. There will be, I would say, a lot of outsourcing when it comes to so-called semi-legal products provided by different kind of specialized institutions, then integrated into the final, so to say, I hate this word, product somehow provided to the client. And this product obviously will have to somehow match what in the older days a lawyer was providing to the client, obviously on a much bigger scale. Now, when it comes also, you've been touching the question, I don't know whether you would like to discuss it now, to what extent a law firm is to somehow replicate a corporate model. And that is, again, I would say, an eternal question in a law firm, because obviously, since we are businesses and we depend on cash flows, but to a very great extent, we are slaves of cash flows. I would say big organisms are slaves of cash flows. So I would say we have to, in a way, keep in mind that we are, I would say, a business. And as a business, we have to take care of the cash flows. On the other side, we have to keep in mind that we are exercising a mission, and somehow we have to combine the water and the fire in a way, and somehow get into a golden middle in between. So a corporate structure obviously is a must for a law firm, but it should not really be its culture. So the culture of a law firm is a consensus, and I would say collective decision. And a corporate structure somehow is only a leverage to enforce a decision if, I would say, consensus is unable to be achieved. And so in a way, this is how we have to develop. I would say, to end up my a little bit too long intervention, I would say that we will have to decide very quickly as partners running the law firms whether we continue with the young lawyers whom we have brought up as partners, or they will, if not, they will somehow go away and open their own law firms. And that is something which probably will distinguish the, I would say, the law firm of 21st century from the law firm of 20th century. That I would say there will be much less salaried lawyers in a law firm, and a lot of partners, many more partners than previously. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas. A lot of points to touch on what you just said. I was wondering if I could just quickly follow up with something that you just mentioned that I thought was quite interesting. You mentioned that you mentioned that big firms are slaves to cash flow, or indeed any big organization is slave to cash flow, and that culture is usually you arrive at a shared culture by consensus, that it's so important for every participant in that firm to feel included and that they shape the overall culture of the firm. So does that, in your view, so firms that I gather, not to put words in your mouth, that I gather that what you're saying is firms are able to give voice to lawyers who participate in them, who practice in them, are much more likely to, in that sense, evolve and move on to, as it were, deal with challenges of tomorrow better. Is that a fair assessment to say?
Yes, certainly.
Fantastic. So thank you very much for that, Thomas. We have one question from the audience that I thought, before we could move on to our agenda, I could just pose it to the panel, and if anyone feels like answering, please let me know. What is your position on the necessity of business development training for the lawyers and law firms? If that is something that you as partners think about, the necessity of business development training.
It is a question to me.
To everyone. And if you, Thomas, if you feel like replying.
Yeah, well, I mean, business development is, I would say, sort of a term which needs to be defined when it comes to a law firm. I think that obviously in this profession, relation building is the core of so-called business development. But in fact, we are not really doing any business, as Boris has already emphasized. We are helping people. So if anyone wants to be helped by us, there must be, I would say, a credit of trust. And this credit of trust obviously is being based on, I would say, your reputation, based on professional integrity and so on. So this, again, I would say we are not really doing any marketing. We are somehow trying to build up a position, and on the base of this position to build up relations with those who are likely to give us, to employ us, to appeal to us for help.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for that. I was wondering if we could move on to Richard, perhaps. So we touched very nicely on different aspects that law firms can use to adapt. One way of thinking about law firms in general is the jurisdictions by which they operate. Richard, so I'm wondering if you could speak to us about some of the main differences between some of the national and international law firms operating in Central and Eastern Europe today, and what is it that they can learn from each other, and what is that we can take from those differences to apply to law firms of the future?
Thank you, Chris. My initial answer to that question is a slightly flippant answer, but it's one which actually I think has more truth in it than might be at first apparent. International firms have recognized brand names. National firms have names that you find very difficult to pronounce. The Poles, to some extent, have found a good solution to this. And if you look at the list of Polish law firms, most of them present themselves by their initials, which is eases the way. And we, to some extent, Lakatosh Kovesh and Partners has become LKT to most of the world. I think unlike most of the other panel members, I have Boris quoted an American writer. I'll quote another one, Joni Mitchell. I've looked at life from both. I've looked at life from both sides now, having worked for some time as in one of the large international firms, Clifford Chance, and then the second half of my career in a national firm. It's clear that in the region, a lot is owed to the international firms. Interestingly, the opening up of the region coincided with the national firms' sort of growth and getting into their stride in the 1990s. And one, I think, rather fascinating fact, certainly in Hungary, which was probably the most extreme example of this, there were more than 40 international firms in Budapest in 1994. I remember going to meetings, Skadden, Debevoise, Sherman's, the whole of firms all had offices in Budapest. They've all pulled out before they went, or as I think everyone around the table would acknowledge that we learned a lot from those firms, and many of the lawyers working in the market now trained at those firms. I'm certainly not here to criticize the international firms. They're excellent, and they're also a key source of work for most of us around the table. But the message is that the national firms, so-called, also are excellent. And in many ways, the distinction is not one which has much meaning. My message to anyone who's looking for lawyers in the region, whether they're in-house or at an international firm not present in the region, is that sometimes, yes, there are very good reasons for picking up the phone to someone in London and saying, I've got a question, I need an answer in 35 countries tomorrow. That you're probably going to get a quicker, easier answer from an international law firm. But in most other occasions, I think all I'm saying is you need to give very careful consideration to what you need and who's best placed to give it. Various arguments come up. I mean, one argument is sort of convenience. I can go around the corner to the guy in the city and have a chat to him about it. But to be honest, in the days of Zoom, I think that argument has probably become even less valid than it was before. And someone in London or New York or Vienna coordinating the matter is more likely to just be an extra link in the chain, an extra cost element. Probably more important is, speakers before referred to people, it's the people. Do you get someone who understands what you need, someone with an international mindset? And here, there's very little difference between the offices in our countries of the international firms and these national firms. The leading elite local firms work continuously on cross-border matters with international firms and clients. They're doing cross-border work all the time. And in many cases, they actually have a heavier cross-border workload and more internationally qualified and experienced lawyers than the so-called international firms. You need the best lawyers, and the firm you're going to needs to have those best lawyers. And there's a question of whether, I think there's no doubt in the countries which have got international firms presence at an early stage in careers, they're better placed for recruiting, but whether they can hold on to those people through their careers is a big issue. And I think as a client or instructing law firm, you need to look very carefully at the individual lawyers you're going to be working for. I just put two sort of questions. Agility, we talked about changing firm structures. I think the national firms are going to be, simply because they are smaller, they're likely to be more agile and more able to face the structural challenges that the profession is facing. Value is a question I would put on the table when making that decision. With this group around the table, I think it's also worth making the point that the people around the table here and the lawyers in our respective firms know each other quite well and have worked frequently together, and that you could send an email to any one of us asking for help on a transaction involving several jurisdictions, and you would get a very quick response, coordinated response, joined up, seamless response, and the work that would then be performed by that group. I think all of us would claim to and believe and have examples of having done that just as well as many of the international firms can do that. Also, as a sort of background and cultural issue, it's worth remembering that the national firms, the firms around this table, live off referrals, and our reputation is based on that. We know that the clients and the law firms that use us have a choice. They can come to us or they can go elsewhere. We don't rely upon work which comes to us just because we're part of a big firm, but work comes from us from people who choose each time to come to us. So one of the most frustrating moments I remember once talking to one of the directory researchers was when they began and said, "Well, you're a national firm. Do you do any cross-border work?" And I think this is true probably for everyone around this table. We all do nothing but cross-border work. It's not a meaningful distinction, national firm, international firm. And therefore, when talking to people wherever they are in the world looking for advice in the region, I think my main message is sort of overcome the bias in your safe default setting and look at the firms you're actually that are available to you and make the decision on an objective view. Forget about the distinction, national or international. Go for a good law firm. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Richard. Martin, I believe you wanted to add something. You might be on mute, Richard. Sorry, Martin, apologies.
Sorry, I'm sorry for the mute. I just wanted to add one thing to what Richard said. Not only we do mainly or almost exclusively cross-border work, but what we can usually offer is good service in the day after. Many of the international firms are so transaction focused that they are not necessarily looking for the continuous service to the client as it settles in the country and wants to develop the business or restructure the business. And here, I think firms like ours were very successful, and it helped during the first crisis. It helped during COVID, because that post-acquisition work is a continuous source of revenue. So this is what I wanted to add to what Richard said.
Thank you, Martin. I'm very heartened. Oh, Peter, I believe you wanted to add something. Please go ahead.
And I'm very thankful for what Richard said. I think it's a stereotype, Richard, you're referring to. Do I go to an international firm, which is typically an Anglo-Saxon one, and by its name sounds like it, and there comes a certain expectation with it. But what I think really counts, you said to the audience, pick a good law firm. And I think what has been crystallizing even more over the last months, I would even say pick a good lawyer. And I think, our job and task is to be a platform for good lawyers. The brand is always important. The culture is hugely important. But at the end of the day, it's the individual lawyer and the individual team that makes all the difference when we are called up. And I would even go further and say, not only call a good law firm, call a good lawyer. and make a wise decision, an individual one.
Thank you, Peter. That is something that comes up a lot in my conversations as well. As you may or may not know, I'm leading the private practice power list aspect. So I speak to a lot of private practice practitioners, and we the intimacy that one develops with a lawyer is such an important element of, I would argue, the outlook of that particular model. Because it is a lawyer and a client go through so much together. If it's a big impersonal organization, so much is lost. And I was also heartened by what Richard originally said about the human element of it, which again is something not to be taken for granted. And Richard, I believe you underlined it with the flexibility, agility, I believe you referred to it. That's one of the biggest strengths, that humans can adapt and can provide a wide range of services and become widely malleable. And so I would argue, in my limited experience, that it's a matter of communicating that to the client and communicating the fact that, borders are artificial things, whether that be reality or law practice or whatever, and just having that avenue open for the client to really take advantage of. So thank you all very much. This is very engaging. I was wondering if we could move on. Martin, you bring in a unique experience due to your litigation background, and which means that at some point you made the conscious decision of setting up a practice. What can you tell us about, as a young person's similar journey? What vision can a firm bring to a young professional looking to set up their own practice? And touching on what Richard just said, what are the margins of flexibility within the profession?
Well, first of all, my litigation background is 30 plus years old. So it's almost difficult to remember, but because for the last 35 years I've been doing M&A, but I think we are talking a lot about acquiring the best talent, keeping the best talent, and the first issue there is not a competition among law firms. The first issue is how to convince that talent to come to the legal profession. The talent graduates from school and now is looking at all the possibilities. So how to keep that talent attracted to the law? And here just two comments. One is, surprisingly, the graduates, the most brilliant graduates, are actually more altruistic than we believe. I've spoken to a number of people and described the concept of simultaneously serving the client and serving the lady with the blindfolded eyes. And they got attracted. It's not so that they are cynical and only looking at the money, because if they were so, we would have none. There are businesses with far better revenues, but there is a level of enthusiasm and altruism, and we should not shy from getting them involved in that discussion. The second element which comes to my mind about when we speak about attracting to law is the versatility. Law is immensely broad concept, and maybe this is what you meant when you mentioned my litigation background. It's like changing professions. Although I was still staying in the same firm, after 10 years of practice, I retrained and started doing something totally different. And the environment of a law firm gave me the possibility of that change of focus. And that is also attractive. They are again not very sure about what they would like to do. They are coming from school. They do not have much experience with dispute resolution or transaction work or environmental law. And to know that there is a flexibility within the profession is an enormous attraction. Then, of course, the second question, if we succeed in attracting them to the law as such, is how to persuade them to come to us and stay with us. And I think it's been mentioned several times. This is all the discussion about culture to a certain extent, because the parts like research, drafting, whatever, there will be no distinction among the firms, or very little. So what differentiates us is the culture. And culture would be a topic for a separate seminar, but I would say, for example, in our firm, there was a concept of humility before the law. So no one should be pretending to understand the law, because no one does. And therefore it's open for discussions, and no one will be ashamed to get back to the book. We simply internally do not pretend to know everything. This is a part of the culture. And also to go with that is a culture of equality. And this is something that Tomek Wardyński mentioned a minute ago, because that's not a corporate structure like I am a partner or managing partner or founding partner or something, and therefore I have a stronger solution. So when we are discussing the law, I am being criticized by a youngster 2 years from school, and he's not worried about that, because the culture allows him to speak up, voice a view, because that's not management, that's not client development work. This is the law, and there we are all equal to discuss the concepts. And that magical mix, and there are lots of elements of culture. I am sure others will try to contribute to the subject, but I just wanted to single out two elements that I believe to be important in our firm.
Absolutely, Martin. And this is something that we come across all the time, that, as you mentioned, no two lawyers' practice is the same. It's the law, it can fit an individual perfectly to their strengths, and they can very much tailor it to themselves, and therefore have more to offer for their clients when they do that. The question also touches on not just attracting people, but also holding on to them. And so the law has such a specific function that, for example, when a Silicon Valley startup offers more lucrative packages for young people, how do we highlight the specific attributes of the law and its contribution to society, and how do we underline that for them, which is very, very important. If anyone else has something to add, I'm happy to add. Before we move on, I just wanted to mention to our audience that we have already a large number of questions, which we will go through. I will just revert to them at the end, where we have a dedicated Q&A session. So thank you very much for that. And we can, I believe, move on to something you already touched, Martin. Now, Aku, if I could turn to you and ask you the following. When we talk about law firms today, a lot of the conversation can revolve around maximizing profit margins and efficiency, legal technical aspects. I am very encouraged by the fact that experienced practitioners such as yourselves seem to be turning the focus back on the human element. So something that Martin touched on just now as well is the importance of a strong culture. Do you believe that a strong culture at a firm can be that enticing proposition to attract someone and hold on to them? And then if we do want to speak the language of money, can strong culture become a competitive advantage in the marketplace, in your opinion?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I think the culture is the one and only core backbone for the law firm to build everything around. But I would like to start a little bit from the earlier parts. I moved to the Baltic region 30 years ago and started to practice here. And how I have seen this profession developing is that it was, back in those days, it was sexy to work in a law firm. It was something that TV series promoted, and it was also considered a place to make good money. And this special attraction to this profession, and also the monopoly type of the bar associations, which in a way restricted the access to this profession. It restricted the supply of the traditional legal services. And this has made law firms perhaps a bit complacent to reinventing themselves and embracing change and develop over the past decades. There was a famous law firm consultant, David Meister, and I think it was him who said that the law firms tend to be poorly managed, and the only reason they are in business is that their competitors are managed even worse. So I think this may be something to do with that. This has been an easy profession for many of us for a long time now. So, and now it has changed so that there are much more attractive professions for younger generation related to technology and businesses working to solve the big environmental questions. So that has put us into a position where we are like any other business. And also at the same time, the bar associations have grown hugely during the past 2 decades, and there is much more supply in the market. So today we must justify our right to be successful corporations. We must differentiate from the competition, attract the best talent, and also therefore the access to the best clients. And there, I think the culture is the only thing that actually enables us to tackle with these challenges. There was International Bar Association. IBA made a review on partner compensation systems on just, was it a little over a year ago, and one of the findings in this review was that even in law firms today, profitability, money is not the main driver for the most successful law firms, but the drive to provide best services and culture. That was the biggest finding. And many senior lawyers say that they constantly get calls from headhunters offering even double income, but they don't leave because of the culture. And I think that's very interesting. So culture is the number one, and then perhaps the other one that we are going to discuss here is the ability to embrace technology. I just looked at our firm. We had 25 different softwares in the use in the firm. But I'm not sure how well our people actually can use all this huge amount of different software platforms we have. And I'm sure this is the same in every law firm, that we tend to get a lot of software and different technology in the firm, but do people actually know how to use it?
Absolutely. I was just wondering if we just now had a very interesting question from a member of the audience about remuneration for young lawyers, and that touches on Boris's introduction as well. Do you think that is one of the causes for the mass resignation? And if so, do you believe that what you just touched on, Aku, could that be an enticing proposition for young lawyers, for someone who might not get as lucrative a package? Is there something alternative that they can get starting out at a law firm?
Oh, just hold on. The question was, I see this remuneration related.
That's right, yeah.
Well, I think this in a way relates to the supply currently. So there is a lot of lawyers in the market currently, and there's a big differentiation taking place, market consolidation taking place at the same time now. And it is increasingly difficult for those who are not very successful also then to offer good remuneration packages. Although remuneration in general, I still believe on this Herzberg theory that there are real motivational factors and there are hygiene factors. So if we think that the money is still one of those hygiene factors, that it just must be good so that you don't feel underestimated. But even if you get this fair compensation, if you don't have enough of the motivational factors, culture being one of them, then you still tend to leave the firm.
Absolutely, there is such a thing as a hierarchy of human needs, and that would be on the bottom of the pyramid. So it's quite important that we address. Thank you very much, Aku, for that answer. Finally, Peter, I was wondering if I could turn to you and talk about the role of emerging technologies in the legal space very briefly, particularly with regards to project management and innovation management. Could technology hold one of the keys to retaining some of the younger lawyers, but by compartmentalizing work and allowing them to focus on less mundane tasks and more about the essence of the jobs?
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Aku, for the perfect introduction in your last sentence regarding technology. I think that's a huge question, Chris, and one that's very, very top on our list of priorities. And I think we all think a lot how to tackle it. And then I was wondering, what does technology mean for us as a profession? Look at this surrounding here. We have some 130 people here. It's the new normal. Think back 2 years. Those online seminars were the thing that nobody attended, and now it's like everybody's doing that, both internally and externally, and nobody's shy to raise questions and engage in such an environment, which I quite frankly think is fantastic. It's a huge challenge, but it's also a great opportunity. And what does that mean for us? Firstly, I think for us as a legal profession, technology is a unique opportunity. It's great, and the positives clearly outweigh the challenges and the negatives. But then we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean? Are we now drivers of technologies? Are we the innovators? And are we gonna rule the world via technology? And I think the answer is not. I think what has not changed is somebody picks up the phone and asks a lawyer and tries to retain a lawyer. Why does that person do so? It's a very individual situation where you need to decide who's going to help me, who's going to advise me in my current problem, issue, or whatever the situation is, and you make a very individual decision and say, I'm calling this and that person. And then I think, we as a lawyer eventually are called because we're problem solvers or issue solvers. And a client implicitly accepts and understands and also requests and requires that we deliver the technology as a tool, but I think typically we are not called upon to say, I need a technological solution for a problem. And that's why I call Boris, Aku, Richard, Thomas, Martin, or Peter in rare instances. But I do have a problem, and that has to do with a legal surrounding and a legal issue, and help me. And that's why I spend money on you and the team. And then the technology comes with it. And I think we need to be literate in terms of technology. We need to be cutting edge, but I don't think we are the suppliers of technology for most and first. So what does that mean for us? I think we need to stay literate. We need to stay on top of things. And I think we need to understand technology as something that allows us, unfortunately or luckily these days, at any time and at any place, to deliver our legal solution to the problem the client is confronted with. And we use it to do so. But again, we are not the ones that sit there and develop the software. And for law firms in generally, both large internationals and even more so leading national firms like the ones that are represented here, it means that we need to make very conscious decisions as we do as to what we do in terms of picking the right technology. I think you can get lost, as Aku pointed to, very easily in starting to insource all sorts of technologies and eventually finding out you have spent a large amount of money on standalone solutions that may be fantastic and that may be great, but that nobody in your firm uses, or only a small fraction of your firm uses, and hence you cannot really leverage on those. And I think that brings you to the questions, do you always go with standard solutions? So you look there and say, this is the market leader in this sort of technology environment, and you're always going with that? I think the answer is sometimes yes, maybe in many cases yes, because you simply need to be able to offer the tool as part of your work. So we need to be vigilant at all times and see what's going on. What technologies do we need to have and do we need to leverage in order to stay on top of things and to enhance our product, which is legal advice at the end of the day, and strategic advice and problem solving. And then I think you also need to be careful in saying, but for certain special situations or arrangements, I need special solutions also in the technology sector. And how do I either develop or source it? Very difficult question. And that is even more difficult if you're not a large organization that is able and capable of sinking a few $1 million or euros here and there and nobody cares. That's something we cannot afford. And, you know, in doing so in the Austrian market that I can make reference to, we have an interesting development. We are a market that's something in between Vienna as some sort of a hub still, and on the other hand, a truly local market. Basically, all of the leading firms have joined forces and have set up something that's called the Vienna Legal Tech Hub, which is a completely private organization funded by law firms and certain private sponsors, dedicated to two things. Firstly, allowing a platform for the development of interesting software solutions. There are rounds of development, almost like the TV shows that are all over the place now, where people can present their ideas and tab financial resources and experience, so that this is the platform for development of software solutions. But on the other hand, it also allows some sort of cost sharing aspect for the national firms that have all come to the same conclusion. You know, we do need software, we do need to stay on top, we need to be an integral part of the development, but maybe it's not a great idea if you're a 70, 100 lawyer law firm to develop that all by yourself, because you will simply not create the returns allowing you to fund such investments. And that double nature so far has worked very well, and I can only highly encourage others to think about initiatives like that. That has worked well for us, and I think it's an interesting suggestion. Chris, back to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. That was very informative, and I have to say, a bit of a refreshing take on conversation around these matters, because a lot of the conversations that we do around these issues tend to be, well, the changes are here, and you know, people tend to sometimes assume a non-critical stance and say, oh, I have to implement all of it or none of it. And it's very refreshing to hear from you that, you know, the genie is out of the bottle. Yes, we have to live with some of these changes, but it's equally important to take a critical stance and see which of these are actually going to benefit my practice and which mainly are going to benefit my client. It sort of reminds me of, I mean, we've had references to a number of writers today. It reminds me of one of my favorite writers, gentleman from Vienna, Viktor Frankl, who argues in Man's Search for Meaning, when one isn't able to change the situation, one must change oneself. And that is a very relevant topic with regards to implementing tech. Thank you very much, Peter. Unless anyone has anything to add to this, I think all gentlemen on the panel should be proud that we have engaged the audience and we have a number of questions to get to. So we're just going to get to that. Something that we have already touched on in the beginning of the conversation. Boris, I'm wondering if I could turn back to you very briefly. We have a question that seems to argue that it talks a little bit about the difference between national and international firms. And as someone that seems to have set up a practice in Bulgaria, I think your very practice is an answer to this question. That's why I'm turning to you, Boris. So the question says, clients ultimately need expertise and the skills to deploy it, which sometimes favors international firms, for example, international capital markets, and sometimes national firms, for example, regulatory or litigation. And the questioner argues that national firms should be profiling themselves more according to this rather than a one-stop shop. I think we've already answered that. That is not the way to go, but I was wondering if I could also get your take on it, or indeed anyone who feels.
Yeah, it's quite clear. I mean, we have never pretended that we could provide qualified advice on something we don't understand. Number one, we are honest, all of us, the six of us. So it was already mentioned that almost 100% of our work has an international element. So in case we need qualified advice, say in Amsterdam or listing in Vienna or wherever, we go to the best local supplier. We don't pretend that we understand how to list a respective Bulgarian company in Vienna. And the same is in Bulgaria. But in our own jurisdictions, most of us, we hate the word full service, but we provide quite broad scope of services in the business sector.
Yeah, that's exactly what I...
Can I just add to that? I mean, I think I would agree completely with that. And a good example, and maybe to be very topical, international capital markets was mentioned in the question. Another subtopic I would mention would be sanctions, which is one where I have a feeling we're all going to be looking at rather more closely than have done in the past. We've generally looked to the large US firms for that advice when clients have come into us. We know how it applies locally, but they have got an enormous background in that area. It's an area we're all going to probably have to become more focused on, but absolutely the areas we focus on broadly are the laws in our jurisdictions. If it has If it's someone else, we will go to the right people who've got the right expertise.
Absolutely. Thank you, Richard. Another question to all panelists makes the point that everyone has some sort of focus in which they can be performing well. Should we still treat lawyers as great individuals and look for great talent? Everyone has talents. Perhaps it is the job of the law firm to discover them and match tasks to those talents. Does anyone have any thoughts on? I believe we all have deconstructed the notion of the great individual so far, but is that something to which you might want to add anything?
Yeah, I'm a true believer in individualism, as you may have already grasped from my previous comments. Yes, I think at the end of the day, it's the individual person, albeit surrounded by a qualified team, but it's the individual person that finds the individual great idea, and then stimulated by a great environment, including the client and including technology. But I think it's our job to enhance and foster individual talent and then manage it as part of a team. But, you know, I think it's all about talent, and it's all about the genius that is truly maybe in most of us. And it's our job to find out where it is and how to enhance it and improve it. But yes, I think that's the big differentiator between great lawyers and other people.
Thank you very much, Peter. That question seems to have stirred quite an interest. Aku, could we come to you?
Yes. This is a great question that relates to the law firm culture. That obviously we need great talent, and as Peter said, we have to match that with the needs of the team. So sometimes we see great talent that is actually quite destructive in a law firm, and there might be great specialists or great rainmakers who at the end of the day may be very destructive for the culture of the firm. So we have to find other roles for those people, or then just guide them out of the firm. Sometimes this talent issue is also we see an issue in relation to leadership. Often we promote the great talented specialists in law firms into leadership positions, and they might not have the best leadership skills. And we try to teach them and educate them to be great leaders, and sometimes without much success. And then it is a big problem for a law firm. You have a great talented specialist in a wrong role. So how do you reposition that great specialist into a position where this person doesn't lead people? And sometimes the only solution is exit again if you have made a wrong promotion to a leadership position. But all of this is so much easier if you have a culture which kind of filters the people on the way up, and filters the leaders into leadership positions and specialists into specialist positions.
Thank you very much, Aku. Tomas?
Well, almost everything has been said. I just would like to sum up. You know, a lawyer should know how to be a leader, but at the same time should know how to play in a team. So in a way, this ability of having two hats is a key ability. And obviously, you have different temperaments. You have people who are likely to be stars, and they are, I would say, as it was mentioned, can be extremely detrimental to a team because their ego somehow overshades their common sense and the rule of reason. In a way, we are somehow like we should, in a law firm, be as a good orchestra, whereas each one of the player could play solo parts. And somehow we have to be attentive enough not to somehow affect our relationship with our lawyers in the team, because in a way it can sour the relationship within the law firm. So this, so to say, emotional intelligence in a law firm amongst the law firm members is a key, so to say, element in the game. We have to be attentive to the needs of the others, but at the same time, when it comes to the position of a leader, we need to know that being a leader is to make other people successful, and certainly the whole of the team successful. So this is how it should work. But I would say, someone said sometimes that we don't need stars, we need pearls. So a pearl is something which I would say shines, but does not give a pain to the others which are around.
Thank you, Thomas. Martin?
I just wanted to add one thing to Joanna's question, and it is we will have to support elements of lawyers' personality that are actually essential for the business now, but even more essential for the same business 10 years from now. And it is kind of empathy, social intelligence, ability to guide. And now I think about guiding the client more than guiding team internally. And I say we are looking for lawyers that the client is continuing to trust. In the world that is going to change, we will have more technology, things may become less personal in certain areas, but that ability of empathy, that ability to take client by his or her hand and guide them through a difficult period, that will remain and may actually become the key asset for a law firm in the changing world.
Thank you, Martin. A different question is directed for Peter. Peter, how do you and your law firm manage to be on top of the legal market in Austria during these challenging times?
A very pleasing question I hardly dare to answer. Are we would be my answer. Hell, I don't know. We are trying hard. And at the end of the day, I think it's what we all do. What we continue and have been continuing to do is we work hard. We embrace the change rather than be afraid of it. And very special thanks to the person who asked that question. I will contribute a certain marketing budget.
Thanks very much, Peter. A different question, which I feel we've already covered largely, but I feel it's worth bringing up just so we can reiterate the point. What is your opinion about legal business remodeling in order to address current and future challenges in our society? If done proactively, this may bring new culture of innovations and improvements. How much innovation do you plan to do? The reason I'm bringing up this question again is just to ask the panelists in general, are there any specific steps you're taking right now or you're planning to take based on this discussion or in general with regards to innovation, any specific initiatives you may have or anything of that sort?
if I may comment on this, the big problem what law firms continuously face is that the lawyers buy time. When the longer they work in a law firm, they become strong specialists. However, the institutional knowledge in the law firm remains limited. So when those specialists leave the law firm, then they usually take a lot of competence with them. So how to tackle this is a big topic for innovation in a law firm, that how does the law firm become a specialist of something? And we have a lot of technology trying to mitigate this issue, starting from the document management systems. In our firm, I think we invested $500,000 to a top-notch document management system already 10 years ago that pulls everything together like it should. So basically that gives you an opportunity to find any document in your law firm. So what happens in practice, that when you start to work in a new case and you start to look what kind of precedents, for example, you have in relation to this, then you may get tens of them or 100 precedents without a clear specification what is this precedent for. And nobody has time to go through 100 precedents. So then the lawyers, they retreat to their own familiar documents they have worked earlier with. So the amount of knowledge, the amount of information, what you are able now to provide your lawyers with, in a way becomes a barrier to grow the institutional knowledge, because there's too much information. And this boils down to discipline. And this is what we lawyers mostly, we lack discipline. We think that technology is going to solve things for us without us needing to change our habits. So take the same precedent example. If people would mark in a precedent just 2 sentences, what is this precedent about? Why is it a good precedent? Then you don't need to open 100 precedents. You just read these 2 sentences and you find something which may fit your needs. And immediately you may find something what somebody else in another team has produced, which is beneficial for you. And knowledge management, I think, is everything. If we can solve this problem in a law firm, that people are not disciplined enough to register their documents properly and information properly in the system, then we remain in a chaos where the law firm doesn't develop and grow institutional knowledge, but it all remains in the heads of our people.
Absolutely. It seems to, if I understand you correctly, Aku, it comes with a certain amount of humility to be able to, as developments come in and new innovations come in, to constantly be able to reevaluate your place within them and to really never rest, but each day evaluate how can one be on top of their practice and really do justice first to their clients and to their own practice, down to the most junior members.
If I may comment on this more, what I think is specific for our CEE region versus, let's say, the big law in the UK and US is that there the average cases are big. They may be in those magic circle law firms, the average case may be 300,000 euros. Whereas at least in the Baltic, I think our average case may be 6,000 euros. So it means that the lawyers, they have so many cases constantly ongoing. They have to jump maybe 5 cases during the same day. And for us, this knowledge management is even more crucial than for the big international law firms. And this may be same in the whole CE region.
Which brings us very nicely to some comments. I would like to just open to the whole panel to talk a little bit briefly before we go. What, in your opinion, are the main trends to anticipate in the wider region for 2022? Aku, you just touched on this. We have quite sobering news this morning coming from the wider region. I'm not sure how much that impacts things. And if you could each give a tip or a suggestion or a piece of advice for our audience that they should be aware of in preparation for the coming year.
Could I start?
Please.
I'd like just to summarize somehow and to be very short, also answering some of the questions. I think that we have to have a dynamic strategy, meaning one with high sensitivity towards trends and developments, as Peter mentioned, to brace them, and in particularly stressing on technology, but with the main factor, the human beings, our people and the clients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Boris.
If I may add one sentence, and I think many of us have taken this for granted, but we all live more or less, sometimes it seems less than more. We live in an environment where the rule of law is very key and center. And I think we cannot overestimate what that means for us individually and as a society. And I think times are as such that we also need to think about our responsibility, not only as money-making organizations, but also as part of a larger society. And we are at the center of defending and fighting for the rule of law. Who would, if not us? And I can only invite each and every one on the panel, but also in the wider audience, to step up and think about that and say, how can we contribute as we individually benefit hugely from the rule of law? And that should continue to be the case for hopefully generations to come.
I could not agree more, Peter, absolutely. And this is something that we have come back to time and again in our conversation. I'm really encouraged by the fact that seeing people who have been practicing for quite a while still be able to reevaluate and adjust and follow developments and take advantage of new initiatives that come along. And what you're just saying, Peter, if I understand you correctly, really comes down to individual responsibility, which shouldn't be taken for granted on any level for anyone, whether that be a lawyer or a client or indeed any member of society. That's something that we should all nurture and never take for granted. Martin?
Well, I just wanted to echo what Peter said about the rule of law, because looking at the region, because this is a mainly regional panel, I think rule of law is an important topic everywhere in the world, but even more so in democracies that have 30 years old institutions like the Central and Eastern Europe. And I think one important issue, although maybe notorious, is that this is business lawyers' matter. It's not to say, well, there are people out there who are to care about rule of law. That's not for me. I am doing deals and earn money. But without strong rule of law, building that tradition inside the society, there is no business law. So, and this should be recognized by each and every business lawyer as a primary task, because I've been trying to explain the concept to people out there, journalists, politicians, wearing my hat of the IBA president. and somehow sadly recognized that although they have a mouthful of the words rule of law, that do not really have the feeling for the concept. And there is a lot to do for us lawyers in this area. And in this region in particular, and this is what I would like to encourage the audience to participate in.
Absolutely, and this is what it comes back down to: participation in any way, shape, or form. We only have a few minutes left, so I would like to offer the opportunity for anyone to add any further comments at this point. If not, I would just like to underline the fact that this webinar is being recorded and will be available online on our website of the Legal 500, so you will be able to revisit if you so wish. It has been a really fascinating discussion, so thank you all. Thank you to the audience for engaging with us and posing the questions. It has been very, very informative and engaging. So thank you to all very much. And unless we have any further comments, we can leave it here. And until next time.